Reddit, what is your true story? I would call balls on if I saw it happen in a movie. I was golfing with my then boyfriend and he got a hole in one. The group of guys teeing off at the next hole cheered for him and waited around to shake his hand. We chatted for a while, then everyone carried on with their game. The next day, we went to a bowling alley and the boyfriend bowled a 300 game. He was one of those guys who was just great at everything he tried. Dang him. The employees announced his score over the PA system and everyone cheers. From the other end of the bowling alley, we hear a commotion, and then see the same group of guys from the golf course making their way over to shake his hand again. 12 years old and went on the Superman roller coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure, and I crap you not, I was in the front row of the roller coaster, and my glasses fell off at the top of the loop when we were upside down. And since you lay down on your stomach for this roller coaster, when I had gotten to the bottom of the loop I felt something touch my hand and I instinctively grabbed it. It was my glasses, caught them right out of midair. I crap you not. I got my job by telling a terrible joke. I was 18 and went to get a job in Sainsbury's. Tanked the interview up until they said, so what do you like about our company? So without thinking I said, your suits make anyone who wears them get jobs. They looked confused, then I showed them the label and my suit was indeed their brand. I got the job. Well, you knew the product and were wearing it yourself. You clearly showed interest in the company. Sincere or not, they shall never know. This one time around 2 years ago I was in my kitchen, and I dropped a piece of pizza. To this day I have not found that piece of pizza. It still makes me wonder. Ghost dog. I was adopted by a young couple when I was 2. It was a traditional closed adoption. About a year later my adopted mother was diagnosed with cancer and passed away within 6 months. My dad later decided to start dating again as that was what his wife had asked of him. He ended up meeting and asking out my biological mother, who was then in a far better place than she had been at the time of my adoption. She didn't meet us until they had been dating for almost a year. It was really emotional. They are now happily married and have been for almost 20 years. I was escaping store security for stealing food, 19 and homeless, and ran into a restaurant. When they asked what I was doing I panicked and said looking for a job. Talked a few minutes. Hired on spot. I have a lot more to haha. That's great. Reminds me of the pilot episode of Suits. To pick up some community service hours in college I volunteered at the local zoo. With it being a rather small zoo, the lion was kept in a giant cage with a fence surrounding it. A storm had come through, so they sent me into the caged area to clean up the fallen branches had created. While picking up said branches I noticed the lion studying me and looking curiously. In a moment of sheer audacity I decided to go up to the cage. Once at the cage I formed my hand into a fist and slowly put it in between the bars. The lion tilted his head and proceeded to tap my fist and walk off. The fear and excitement that preceded was amazing. TLDR. I fist bumped with the lion. Dude, when I was that close to the tigers they told me to stay the frick back. According to them, tigers pull you in as far as they can and then bite your arm off. No idea if it's true, but you should consider yourself both lucky and alpha as frick. My bicycle's chain jammed while riding down a steep street. I looked down and didn't notice the curb. I hit it at full speed, made a front flip with the bike, then another front flip by myself, and landed standing up like a boss. A friend of mine once had her hat thrown out the window of a bus by a gay man with a sense of fashion. It was a leopard print fedora. He did the world a good service. I was kidnapped at gunpoint in a Taco Bell drive-thru. Long story, but I eventually was able to flee the car after visiting an ATM to get him money. He immediately stole the car and drove away. Little did he know that I had left my cell phone in between the seats, and the cops were able to track him in real time, circle in and arrest him. When I was in high school I drove a Jeep Cherokee. This was the late 1990s. I had driven the same road to school and back every day for years. It was a 5-lane highway with a middle turning lane. Well, one day the highway department came along and put in a new stoplight at this one intersection which had never had one before. So I am headed home on the highway, maybe from school, maybe from my after school job, and anyway I approach this intersection. I see a car drive across in front of me and look up and see a stoplight, which is red. In my confusion over the sudden appearance of this light, I say aloud, "That guy just ran that red light." Then the brain starts working again. Red light. My lane. I am about to run a red light. Oh crap. I slam on the brakes and my car goes into a fishtail with me swinging around to the left. Now at this moment there happened to be a guy in the left-hand turn lane, waiting to turn left at the light. I was driving in the fast lane, so when I started my skid, it was like you had tied a rope from the front of my Jeep Cherokee to the hood of his car. I do a full 180 around the intersection and I am making eye contact with this guy the whole time. I wind up in the slow lane of the opposite lanes of travel facing back the way I had come. I look ahead of me, look back at dude, whose jaw is just hanging open, nod, and proceed to drive back the way I came at a leisurely pace. TLDR. Dude on his way home from work accidentally drove onto the set of my own personal Bond movie. I was driving home from Burbank, CA one morning in 1986. At a stoplight, I looked to my right and noticed a shiny red Porsche next to me. I looked closer at the driver and it was Bill Murray, so I waved at him, mouthing the words, "Wow, you're Bill Murray." He just looked at me, smiled, and revved his engine. So I revved my pathetic Isuzu. The lights turned green and the Porsche screamed off the line, Bill looking at me the whole time, smiling. As his car disappeared into LA traffic, I whispered to myself, "Wow, that was Bill Murray. No one will ever believe you." I was driving home through downtown Portland when a champagne bottle dropped out of the sky, bounced off my hood and shattered on the curb. This is way better than other things I have had land on my car in Portland. I rang out the last customer of the evening on Christmas Eve a few years back. Their total was $25.25. My grandfather gave this guy $2 and told him to buy each of them a lottery ticket for $1 backup. Lo and behold, Christmas Day's drawing has 2525 as the play for number, and the guy who we had never met prior to the night before returned one of the winning tickets to my grandfather. Pretty cool story. Plus they each were up $6,500. A true Christmas miracle. I watched my brother get a gun pulled on him and say, without skipping a beat, "I hate to shatter your ego but this ain't the first time I've had a gun pointed at me." It actually was, and hopefully the last time. He probably peed a little, but he stayed cool as a cucumber till the dude took off running. Not sure if that counts since it did happen in a movie, Pulp Fiction. Also, when I was a kid, 9 or 10, I watched a kid take a foot-long icicle that fell off a play structure, right in the eye. He was looking up at the kids running across the upper part. He collapsed and I was pretty sure I just watched a kid die. The adults rushed him off to the hospital. It was like 4 blocks from the school, small town, and he came back to class about 2 hours later. Totally fine, just had a black eye. Because he was looking up, the icicle perfectly penetrated through the little fleshy part under the eyeball and stopped in his sinus cavity, completely missing the eyeball and the brain. Probably the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've seen some weird stuff. Your brother is a badass. I slept through my first 3 years of high school. Earned 2 credits the entire 3 years. I wouldn't have even gotten the 2, but one was an art class, and my teacher told me that my protest of going to school by sleeping was art in and of itself. She gave me a C. The other was an A, given to me by my pay teacher, who flat out told us if we show up, we get an A. Technically I showed up. One day I woke up and found myself with motivation. Now I didn't ask for this motivation, and I didn't want it, but there it was. The summer before I started my 4th year of high school I went to summer school getting 4 credits. When school started back for the regular year I went to an alternative school for the criminally insane about 12 miles away from 7:30 am to 3:30 pm where I was able to get 6 credits per semester. 12. The students in that school were all suffering from schizophrenia, bipolar, and had all committed serious crimes. I talked to my guidance counselor and explained that my sleeping was a result of my depression and she used that as an excuse to get me into that school. From 4 PM till 10 PM I went to the community college for something called extended school day which was for high school students who were parents. I wasn't a parent but I had a talk with the director of the program and I think she was so taken aback by the sheer audacity of my request that she gave me the okay. There I was able to get 6 more credits per semester, 24 altogether. My school required 28 to graduate. I finished high school on time and graduated with my class. My diploma says the name of my regular high school on it because even though I went to these other schools, technically I was still enrolled in my school. I'm sure if this were a movie they would show it all in a montage with me traveling from school to school, flipping through books, etc. Oddly enough, most of my teachers loved me at those schools. They were so used to teaching people with no future and who were doing only the minimum that when I turned in assignments that had serious work done they actually got to do some real grading. I am 30 and still in contact with a lot of those teachers. Seriously good people. In my summer job in college I drove around towns and cities spraying weeds with herbicide. Good job, decent pay, and I got to explore places I'd never see otherwise. It also put me in close contact with all the weirdos you see milling around during the day. With such a conspicuous job people would frequently stop me to ask what we were doing. Most of the time it was a curious resident or someone cursing me for using herbicides, but sometimes I met real oddballs. One encounter that always stands out to me went like this. A disheveled woman, maybe homeless, maybe just odd, stumbled over to me. She made some guttural noises, grunted a bit and asked if I had a cigarette, but as she was asking a freaking tooth flew out of her mouth. Mid-sentence we both stopped and watched her freaking tooth fall to the sidewalk. She made eye contact, asked again if I had a cigarette, then shuffled away when I said no. I thought there was no way a woman just casually split a tooth at me. It had to be food stuck in her teeth or something. But when I looked down, as clear as day was a rotten tooth on the sidewalk. The guy I was working with started to freak out a bit, and I couldn't even wrap my head around it. We got the frick out of there after that. Years later, I can't believe it actually happened, and I'm glad someone else saw it. TL. Doctor, a homeless woman spit a tooth at me while asking for a cigarette. I questioned my sanity. I made a parachute contraption by tying some twine through the loops on a large tarp. On a windy day when I was 10 I unfurled it in the fields near my house. Instantly it caught the wind and before I knew it I was flying, holding onto the small stick that held the twine together. I flew up so high that I could see the over the tops of the nearby houses. When I finally came down I had flown about the length of a football field and was perfectly unharmed. Nearly crapped my pants though. Went to some crappy town outside of Vegas on my birthday about 15 years ago. My birthday evening, my GF is at a blackjack table and I get bored, so I go play some nickel slots and get free drinks. I do pretty well at the Nicholas, so I cash out and take the money to some quarter slots. I do well there too, so I cash out and head to the dollar slots. Once again I win big, few $100s, which was a big deal to me. I want to keep my winnings, so I cash out. GF is still playing cards, so I go back to the nickel slots to dong around until she's ready to go. Once again I win, move to the quarters, win again and move to the dollar slots. Not as much as the first win, but I still turned a few nickels into almost $100. So I cash out again. She's still not ready to leave, so I start over again. Win some money on nickel slots, move to quarters and win more, and move to dollars and win again. And then midnight hit. My birthday was officially over. I was up around $500. I couldn't win a goddamn thing after that. When I was 11 or 12 I had this friend named Paul. Me and Paul had just filled our bike tires up with some air before hitting the streets for some riding. About 3 minutes into our bike ride, Paul's freaking back tire explodes, causing him to fly through the air, holding onto his handlebars the whole time. It was one of the craziest things I have ever seen in my life. I drove a nail into a 2x4 in one shot, with the claws of my hammer. I currently build trusses for a living and a co-worker bet me I couldn't hammer a nail with the claws of my hammer. I one-upped him and said I would do it in one shot. I ended up doing it 3 times in a row. This happened my nana's funeral. After the service 2 long-time drinking buddies recognized each other. "G'day Jim, what are you doing here?" "I'm at my auntie Nell's funeral," he said. "But what are you doing here?" he asked, perplexed. "I'm at my grandmother's funeral." They had known each other for 30 years, and up until to that point these 2 guys had no idea they were related. My coming out story. My family and I were going on a Caribbean cruise, and 13-year-old me needed FAP material. So the night before I found a bunch of hot pictures online and decided to print them and hide them in my suitcase. Except the pics were taking forever to print. There were a ton of them, and I couldn't cancel the print queue. So in a moment of panic, I shut off my computer manually and went to bed. When my mom rebooted the computer the next morning to print our boarding passes for the cruise, naturally, the print queue reloaded and started reprinting. She had to sit through 2 or 3 printing before she could figure out how to cancel the rest. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when she burst in the bathroom, pics of scantily clad men in hand. "Do not tell your father. We will discuss this when we get home." I nodded, ashamed. She eventually printed the tickets, we finished packing, and headed to the ship. To my delight, my mother's horror, she had accidentally booked a gay cruise. My sister, mother, father and I spent one fabulous week in the Caribbean. Oh my. The protagonist moves to the other side of the country, where he accidentally reconnects with a long-lost childhood friend love interest when they both reach for the same comic book in a game shop. That's so cute. Reminds me that in college, I ran into my long-lost best friend from grade school. I think that's about as unbelievable as my stories get. Yours is way cooler. A hot girl actually crashed into me on her bike, and then we actually fell into a pile and I found myself with my hand on her boobs. Of course, she then started yelling at me about looking where I was going. And I hobbled to class on bruised legs with bystanders laughing at me. So, you probably belong in an anime. A few months ago my shampoo and conditioner ran out at the same time, totally unplanned. My roommates did not find it nearly as crazy as I did. I have been disabled twice and recovered from it. First time, fell out of a tree and landed on my back and lost all function to move. Second time, kicked into a radiator while I was a child and couldn't move due to shock. Both times lost all motor functions and recovered from it. You should stay away from things and refrain from doing things too. Lost control of my car in a wet intersection. It skidded onto a sidewalk between a parked car on the curb and a brick building on the corner without even scratching the paint on the side of my car or cracking a headlight. Did clip the passenger side mirror off of the other car though, and I think dented his fender. Clean through back onto the road where I managed to bring it to a stop on the curb perfectly. If I saw that crap happen in a movie I'd say that wasn't possible, but it happened. Similar stunt moves. I was driving my sister's 1992 VW Fox in winter on icy roads. Took a corner a bit too fast and did a full spin parallel parking the car between 2 other vehicles. I'm so glad my sister was in the car or no one would have believed me. When I started college my school set me up with a roommate. This kid was a few years older than me and had 2 nice cars, all kinds of sweet electronics, a credit card that got paid off monthly by some guy in New York, nice clothes, pretty much anything you could think of he had. The guy in New York was in his mid-30s while me and my roommate were in our late teens, early 20s. Every month I received a check from this guy in New York paying my roommates half of the bills. My roommate said this guy was his business partner and they owned multiple businesses together, so I didn't think much of it. I even googled the guy and found out that he did in fact own some businesses in NYC. My roommate, who we will call John, was hardly ever at the apartment and soon got kicked out of school for missing too many days. After about 2 months of not seeing John and not seeing any money from the guy from New York, I was starting to have trouble keeping up with the bills all by myself. Around Christmas time the guy in New York calls me to tell me that John was planning on getting his stuff when I wasn't home and then ditching me without paying me any of the money he owed me. I was home for Christmas, so I went straight back to school to the apartment and took everything that he had left in there back home with me and got the locks on the door changed. A few days later the guy from New York calls me again and asks if I'm curious as to what is going on, and I'm like, yeah, a little. Well, it turns out that John was actually his partner in the bedroom. John had a pretty bad drug habit and was missing school going back to his home city to buy drugs, and the guy in New York wasn't pleased about this, so he stopped paying his bills. In retaliation, John told the guy in New York's wife about them fricking. John also had a smoking hot GF. I had no idea whatsoever that this was going on. The guy in New York told me he wanted to show John that he could control his life and offered me $1,000 for whatever I had of John's. I agreed, and he said he would have it charged to his FedEx account and they would contact me to arrange a pickup. A couple days later I received the check in the mail, cashed it and paid my back rent and got out of my lease. I never heard from the guy in New York again and FedEx never contacted me, so I kept what I wanted and sold the rest on eBay. A few months later a pretty pee-off John called me, but I really didn't care. One of the craziest things to ever happen to me in my life. I was about to say that New York guy probably murdered John and told you that story. Had to take some passport photos years ago in a photo booth, the little goddamn photo booth type of photo booth. I followed the instructions. Everything went fine and I thought I was done. Until I had to wait for the pictures to come out. I waited and waited and waited until I got so freaking bored with it that I just kicked the photo booth on the side, because frick dead machinery that doesn't do what they are supposed to do. Immediately after I had kicked, my passport photos came out. I got so surprised of the fact that kicking it had actually seemed to work that I just stood there for a few seconds with my mouth open, thinking to myself that crap is only supposed to work in movies, and that, my friends, was probably the most boring anecdote you read on Reddit today. It made me laugh out loud on a train, so it can't have been that bad. Though that having been said, it was the last two lines that made me laugh. My grandfather was in the hospital with cancer when I was 4-5ish, but I thought he was just sick and would get better. I woke up in the middle of the night and he was in my room. I was excited because I thought he got out of the hospital to surprise me, and we talked about how he made his grilled cheese sandwiches that I loved. A few minutes into the conversation I looked down and saw that there was nothing below his knees. He was just kind of floating at the same height he would normally be standing at. I got scared and ran into my mom's room and told her about it before going to sleep on the foot of her bed. The next morning the hospital calls and tells her that my grandpa died in the middle of the night. When I was a few years older I finally heard the full story. When he started taking a turn for the worse, he was rushed into an emergency surgery to amputate his legs in a last attempt to save him. They were unsuccessful and he died a few hours later. I can't imagine how creeped out my parents were, and I still don't even believe in ghosts. I once fumble tossed an apple about a foot into the air, rolled it over the tops of my shoulder blades, down my arm, and caught it with the opposite hand. I felt like Aladdin. When I was younger, me and my older sister shared a room. She was probably like 10 and I was probably like 5 or 6. One night she was giving me airplane rides on the bed and suddenly decides to be a dong and kick me off her feet as hard as she could, and I went flying across the room. I landed on my open dresser drawer about 7 feet away, right on the edge of it on my head, doing a complete headstand for about 6 consecutive seconds. It was amazing and we still talk about it to this day. No one has ever believed this story, but I swear on everything it happened. Riding home on my bicycle from the grocery store, backpack loaded with heavy groceries, and I have a bag on each wrist with 2 giant boxes of corn flakes in each bag, because sale. Riding along, my knee hits one of the bags, causing me to veer out into traffic. I immediately overcompensate and head straight for the curb, which I hit and then flip over my handlebars. Luckily, I end up landing on the boxes of cornflakes, which explode all over but cushion the fall like airbags. No harm, no foul, no cornflakes left. I had a roommate move and that turned it to be insane. Not LOL, I'm so crazy, I mean a calculating psychopath that ended up institutionalized. A few months later I moved in with another person who also turned out to be just as insane. That was a dramatic year. My sister has had both a heart transplant and a kidney transplant after being ill for 9 months following heart surgery. She then had to have surgery on her legs to fix contractures that developed as a result. Then just over a year ago she was diagnosed with multiple brain tumors, unrelated to previous things, and she's still alive and fighting, in the middle of her GCSEs being a moody teenager. She's amazing. Your sister is amazing, man. Tell her to be strong for me. I passed out on a high dive and fell about 20 feet. I landed on a section of water that was 4 feet deep with concrete at the bottom and I wasn't even injured. A couple years ago, my uncle died of a massive stroke. I hadn't seen him in a couple years. His wife and stepson didn't have a funeral, as per my uncle's will. I was not close to his family and felt too awkward to show up, so I sent a card, flowers, and arranged for a couple dinners to be delivered. A few months later, I was 3/4 of the way through a driver's course and had been sitting at the same table as a young man named James the whole time. He was a quiet kid, and to engage him in conversation, I asked him what prompted him to take the course. He said that a few months back, his dad had died of a stroke at work and had left James his truck. He went on to say that his step-cousin, while never very close to the family, had dinners delivered and that gesture had been a comfort to his mom. His stepdad, was my uncle. I said Jamie and he said it's just James now. OMG hazard. Holy crap, coincidence? Reunited by fate? Lost virginity to girl in my duplex college apartment during the first week of the semester. A one night stand and we never spoke to each other again. The next year, she moved into the other apartment in the house. Got hired on with a company to manage their website. It only took about 15 hours a week, so I filled my extra time by making silly videos making fun of people in the company. I was so bored that I eventually tried to quit to take a better paying job. CEO found out I was trying to quit, saw my videos and thought they were hilarious, then almost doubled my salary and booked a movie theater for the next company all hands meeting to show them all. He later sold the company for well over $100 million, then used some of the money to invest in my completely unrelated startup. True story. BTW, I'm currently typing this while working at a bar. Cheers. I took my winter coat off and the cord lock on the tassel hit my friend right in the eye, shattering his hard contact lens in his eye and requiring a hospital trip to get it flushed out. I am impressed you know the nomenclature for a cord lock on the tassel. I'd either called it the hard plastic thingy hanging from a string off the cuff. Oh boy, this will be a long, but, I hope, fun read. It could easily be one of those red-blue socially awkward penguin story memes. Anyway, here it goes. Last summer, the food store close to where I live got a new shopkeep. Whenever I went to buy something, she and I would frequently shoot the crap and it was evident that we had a lot of things in common, especially music. I finally decided that I liked her and started dropping hints, which she skillfully deflected. Eventually I gave up and stopped with the moves, so that I don't become annoying. But it's not I like grew cold either, and continued to be interested in her. At one point, something really coincidental started happening. 3 times in a row, it would happen that whenever I go to the store to buy something and she's on a shift, the radio would play a Lana Del Rey song. And we both like LDR. We both noticed that. So on the 3rd time, I told her, hey, is fate trying to tell us something? And she really got a kick out of that. Then I go to the store for the 4th time. The next day, she's standing outside having a smoke and meets me with the words "huh." This time the radio isn't playing Lana, which was correct. However, I declare with the most confident tone, 1000%, by the time you finish your cig, Lana will come up. And I said it like it was the surest thing in my life. The current song ends and bam, blue jeans. The girl was about to have a heart attack. I just looked at her and said told you, after which she gave me this dreamy look, as if she has just noticed something in me she's never seen before. Then she went to the other cashier to share the story of how it's already the 4th time this coincidence happens. Meanwhile, I went in to buy cigs and asked the serving cashier when the shop will stock on Monster Energy drinks. She just bobbed her head toward the girl and whispered with some insane urgency, ask her, ask her. So I went outside. I went to the girl and asked her, when will you stock on Monster? Spoiler, I saw a part of her die in her eyes. It took me to get home to realize what I'd just missed. I don't think I slept that night. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.